Okay, so just about logic or logos in this book, in the Ben Franklin. Okay, now you want to look at handout one, where it describes the ethos, pathos, and logos. You want to make sure that you read the book on it. There's just those few pages. KB, there isn't, it's not a lot about making the argument via logic in this book. Okay, because the main things that we expect when we see logical argumentation are things like studies, or this is how we often think of it, studies, like a scientific study where they did a research and they took some subjects and they had a control group and they found that this or that was true. For example, look on page 42 of the book. It says, "He that lieth down with dogs shall rise up with fleas," right? Now, you could have done a study and had 20 people lay down with a dog and see how many rise up with fleas. It's all of them. Therefore, it's proven by research that this is true. Now, you don't see that kind of thing, citations of studies in this book, right? You also don't see statistics quoted. For example, on page 43, when it says, there is no little enemy, you don't see a list of a bunch of enemies and a showing of 30% are little and whatever. You don't see that. That's what you'd expect when you see what we normally think of when we look at logos in the modern sense of how we're thinking about it. Okay, but it's in there in a sort of a side way. Okay, so you can write about it being in there in the sense of the Aristotelian way that we talked about. For example, he says, this is on that handout one, all teaching and learning that involves the use of reason proceeds from pre-existent knowledge. Okay, a lot of that is what we could call common sense. It's just, you just know this. Why do we need a scientific study to tell us that he that lieth down with dogs shall rise with fleas? Or the rotten apple spoils his companion. You know that both of those are really sort of poetic ways of saying that if you have bad companions, hang out with the wrong people, bad things will happen. Do you see that? If you do all this, it will logically follow, or it will reasonably follow, that such and such will happen. You see that pretty often in this book, is that if you do this, then this is going to happen, therefore you don't want to do this. That's a simple way of reasoning. People reason like that all the time. You do it with your kids. Don't do this, otherwise this will happen. Again, they have to accept that premise that such and such will happen if you do this. Most people will accept it because, as Aristotle has here, look at this. It says, first, then we must say what reasoning is. Reasoning is a discussion in which certain things having been laid down, something other than those things necessarily results. Okay, once you accept this, this will happen. Okay, for example, a quarrelsome man, this is on page 42, a quarrelsome man has no good neighbors. Okay, logic or reason or common sense, sort of a, let's just say, logic and reason maybe, but for sure common sense, which are sort of, it's a sort of a folk reasoning or people reasoning, will say that if you are very quarrelsome, people will avoid you. Okay, it's too common sensey for any sociological studies to be even done on it. Again, this is just generally accepted opinion. And look on that handout on what he says about maxims. These are maxims, proverbs, sayings, aphorisms, however you want to call it, just little sort of small sets of wisdom, small proverbs or short sets of words that are never very long. You notice they're all short, they're memorable. Okay, but again, just to repeat my points here, there's not a lot of logic in the sense of scientific reasoning in this, but there is common sense. Okay, you'll see that sort of common sensey argumentation in this. So in your papers, you want to kind of have it that way. You can either sort of push the whole idea that it's just not a whole lot of logic here, and you can show that, and just the way I did in this video, or you can find some in here that have this kind of sort of if-then type of reasoning or commonsensical way of talking and cite that. Okay, it's all over, and it's actually kind of fun. And again, in this book, there's stuff that you're just not going to understand, but there's a lot that you will. It's pretty basic, so it's kind of fun.